Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and now it's time for another edition of Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. And we're diving once again back into the wisdom of St. Thomas Aquinas. And of course, what did he have to say about miracles? Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. Good to talk with you. And I love, again, how everything kind of ties together this morning. Even Dave Basheris's word of the day, which was perfect. And I was thinking, okay, perfect is kind of like perfect. And I think that ties into miracles as well. So you guys do a great job in putting all this together, I must say, or God does. So yeah, I love how Adam and Debbie were kind of talking about the miracles and saying, and he referenced St. Thomas Aquinas a couple of times. So hopefully I can do justice in explaining a little bit about what St. Thomas Aquinas, the angelic doctor, had to say about miracles. And, first of all, what is a miracle in itself? And the way in my, study of St. Thomas Aquinas, I would say that something that happens beyond the natural order through the power of God. And I know Adam really stressed that, is that miracles can only happen through the power of God, even if humans can sometimes be the instrumental power of them. And they're also signs. And so they are a manifestation of the supernatural. Okay, so God allows the miracles to be done for the signs of his supernatural. Sometimes they're also called wonders. Adam talked about the different names and the different categories of miracles as well. And it's interesting, by the way, because I won't have a Back to the Father show this Friday, because a few of us, as you know, Keith, are going to Medjugorje. All right, we're going to be doing a pilgrimage to Medjugorje. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of people go to these, Marian apparition sites, especially Lourdes, and they're looking for miracles. They're looking for some kind of, change in the natural order of their cancer. And that's a great thing, because it shows a great trust in the power of God. But the interesting thing with the healing of the body is that the body heals itself oftentimes on its own. So that's why it's sometimes hard to tell if something was an actual miracle, because the body is designed to heal itself, right? Mm-hmm. But the body is not designed to raise itself from the dead. And so a more classic, example of a miracle would be, Lazarus being raised from the dead, because that's not in the natural order for, a dead body to come alive again, right? So that would be absolutely a miracle. Whereas with the healing of a body, sometimes and sometimes not, it's a little bit trickier. Mm-hmm. In Numbers 22, when Balaam's donkey was talking, if you remember that in the Old Testament, that's a miracle, because donkeys don't talk. Okay, that's something supernatural. That's not within the natural order. St. Thomas Aquinas, in one of the rare moments of humor in the Summa Theologia, actually poses the question of whether, if we throw a stone up in the air, have we performed a miracle? Because stones don't naturally go up, they come down, right? I mean, it's Thomas, he's like a stand-up comedian. But of course that wouldn't be through the power of God, So he's like, no, that's not a miracle, even though it's contrary to the natural order, right? So that those are how we might define miracles. In the Summa, St. Thomas Aquinas primarily deals with miracles in two different places. One of them is where he talks about what he calls gratuitous graces. We talked about this a month ago or so, about we have, sanctifying grace that perfects us through the sacraments, baptism and confirmation. And then a gratuitous grace is something that is given to a person beyond their natural power for the benefit of somebody else, right? So just like you would have healing or prophecy or tongues or interpretation of tongues or teaching, those are all gratuitous graces, gratuitous gifts. Well, the miracles are another one. But, as Adam pointed out, they're only done through the power of God, but then the person is going to be the instrumental cause of carrying out the miracle. And examples in scripture of like Peter raising Tabitha from the dead. Well, that was a gratuitous grace that he was given, because human beings can't generally raise people from the dead. And there's other examples of that as well. And then the second big place that miracles are treated in the Summa is Jesus's miracles, and that's where most of the treatment of the miracles are. And well, one thing that Aquinas talks about a lot is that Jesus performed miracles for our benefit. He didn't really have to do this. This is something that in every single case, and there's a lot of different examples of miracles, he did it for love of us, for the benefit of us. And I'll kind of pause there, and then we can get into a little bit more about Jesus's miracles, because he writes about it considerably. That's most of the treatment of miracles in the Summa is about what Jesus does to miracles. But anyways, thoughts on that, Keith?
Yeah, I'm curious. So are Marian apparitions, would they be considered in the category of miracles or just apparitions? Do you know?
Well, I think they would be considered miracles, because it's something beyond the natural realm, But then it's a great question, because you also think that, well, once Mary was assumed into heaven, she kind of took on a different state, right? So for her to, she's only going to be able to come down here and visit through God's permission, right? Mary is not doing that on her own, so therefore there's some supernatural element or level to that. Or something like we hear about these Eucharistic miracles, where the host is turned into the actual flesh of Christ. So it's only going to be done through God's initiative and permission. And so in the section on miracles, there's some objections that are raised as to Jesus working miracles. And first of all, Jesus says in Scripture, a wicked generation seeks signs, but no sign shall be given, other than the sign of Noah. And also, Jesus is described as coming in infirmity and weakness. And one of the objections is, well, that doesn't seem very weak if you're running around performing miracles, right? And one of the objections is, well, men should believe on faith and not through miracles, right? That when you do miracles, it makes it too obvious, too easy on us, right? And so then again, Thomas says, well, God allows miracles for two reasons. First of all, to confirm doctrine. Okay, so as Jesus is walking around and proclaiming the gospel, when he did the miracles, it gives a little bit more punch, a little bit more confirmation that he actually is God, speaking as God. And then also to make God's presence known. Okay, and what better way to make God's presence known than Jesus, who is God himself, right? So those are the two reasons why, God, I guess you could say, allowed, so to speak, Jesus to manifest and do miracles. And then the one thing that is brought up in the Summa that's also interesting is that on a couple of occasions, like when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, when he multiplied the loaves and the fishes, it's said that he looked up, all right? And people would say, oh, he's looking up because God, he's not doing it, God's doing it. And Thomas says in the Summa that he didn't need to look up because he is God himself, right? He had the power as God to do it. But just kind of like when he was baptized, he was doing it as an example for us. Okay, he looks up because he's trying to show, like, hey, if you want me to do, miraculous things, then, look up to me, rely on the power of God. One other interesting thing, and I know we're starting to run out of time, but he talks about, was the first miracle that Jesus ever did at Cana. And of course, we know it is, because that's what Scripture says. But there are some apocryphal writings you may have heard of where it says that Jesus did miracles as a child, right? And St. Thomas Aquinas would say that Jesus he was God from the moment of his conception. So why would he wait, 31 years to do his first miracle? Wouldn't it be so tempting, as a child, because he had the power to do so? And interestingly, St. John Chrysostom said, if he had performed miracles younger in life, he probably would have been crucified younger in life, because he had to manifest himself in time. And of course, people would have started getting freaked out if this kid was running around doing miracles, right? So Thomas says he had to do it in the order of perfection when he had reached the perfect age. And also it was the benefit of his disciples that they followed him initially before they saw miracles. It wasn't until a little bit later into the ministry that he did his first miracles. And so that's that. And let me see, I know we're and then one other quick thing is he talks about all the different kinds of miracles. He works miracles on spiritual beings like angels. He works miracles in things like the sun and the moon. Even today, you think about Fatima, the dancing sun. All right, people go to Medjugorje. I talked to a lady last week who said she saw the sun, manifesting itself in strange ways in Medjugorje. Because people think of these things as being permanent, unlike natural bodies that are always changing. You don't think of the sun as changing or the moon as changing. So it shows an extra, power of God to be able to change these kind of things, right? Yeah. So anyways, there's a little bit of Thomas's treatment of miracles in the Summa.
That's very interesting. We're really excited to hear more about your trip to Medjugorje. And obviously we don't have enough time to go into depths of the what and why, but maybe in the in the round table after the guest segment, we'll have to dive deeper into that. But yes, normally Dave would be on Back to the Father, which is usually every single Friday, but he's, like he said, he's going to be on that trip to Medjugorje. Still, make sure to go on the YouTube channel, GRN Online, and go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notifications so that way every Friday at 1 p.m. Central, you'll be able to jump in and, catch some more of St. Thomas Aquinas. But thanks once again, Dave. And that is it for today's, this morning's first hour of Morning Joy, where truth matters. Tomorrow morning, we'll be joined by Sissel Anderson on Fruitful Living. For those unable to stick around, though, for the second hour, make sure to tune in bright and early tomorrow morning, same time, 6 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Eastern. Until then, God bless. Make it a joyful day. For those staying with us, we know miracles aren't fairy tales or footnotes in scriptures. No, they happen. And in a few minutes, we're going to be talking about what gets in the way of seeing them with author Anthony DeStefano. So make sure to tune into that. We're going to take a quick break. But on the other side, we're going to be doing a whole nother second hour of Morning Joy, where truth matters. And hang tight. We'll be right back.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.